Story 1. The Whispers in My Grandmother's House. I should have known better than to stay in a house that was left to me with a warning. My name is Ava, and my grandmother's will was simple. I inherited the old family cabin on Lake Silence, but the lawyer read a handwritten codicil in her shaky script that said, "Do not sleep in the master bedroom. The door must remain locked." I thought it was just the eccentricity of a dying woman, a bit of family superstition. The cabin itself was a beautiful, rustic A-frame nestled in dense pine woods, the air smelling of damp earth and old fireplace smoke. But from the moment I arrived, little things felt off. The key turned in the front door lock with a screech that sounded like a gasp. All the mirrors in the living room and hallway were covered with dusty white sheets. And the master bedroom door at the end of the upstairs hall wasn't just locked. It had 3 heavy-duty deadbolts, all installed from the outside. I spent the first day cleaning, trying to make the place feel like mine. The silence of the woods was absolute, a thick blanket that muffled even the sound of my own footsteps. That night, as I tried to sleep in the guest room, I heard the first whisper. It was so faint I thought it was the wind in the pines, a 3-syllable sigh that seemed to come from the walls. "Ava, come in." I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. The house was still. I told myself it was just the settling of an old structure, my imagination fueled by my grandmother's note. You know, it's funny the things we tell ourselves to feel safe. What's the weirdest sound you've ever heard in your own home that you tried to rationalize away? The next day, the whispers became clearer. While making coffee, I heard a childlike giggle from the empty dining room. While stacking firewood on the porch, a man's voice, gruff and impatient, muttered, "She's here." The worst was the sound of scratching from behind the master bedroom door, not like an animal, but like long fingernails slowly, deliberately, being dragged down the inside of the wood. The air in the hallway grew colder the closer I got to that door, and the smell changed from pine to something metallic and old, like wet iron and forgotten flowers. After 2 nights of barely sleeping, jumping at every creak, I'd had enough. I decided my grandmother was just paranoid and I was being foolish. I found a toolbox in the garage, and with a determined fury, I pried off the 3 deadbolts. The door swung inward silently on well-oiled hinges. The room was disappointingly normal. A large 4-poster bed with a bare mattress, a dusty dresser, a tall, sheet-covered mirror. The window looked out over the serene lake. I felt a wave of relief so strong it made me laugh. I'd been terrified of a dusty old room. I aired it out. Even decided I'd move my things in there the next day. That night I slept deeply in the guest room, the silence now feeling peaceful. I was wrenched from sleep not by a sound but by a feeling, the suffocating sense of being watched. The room was pitch black, but the darkness by the door was deeper, a solid shape. I fumbled for the lamp. The click echoed and the light revealed the doorway was empty. My sigh caught in my throat. Reflected in the dark window across from my bed, I saw them. Figures. A pale woman in a nightgown by the dresser. A shadowy man looming near the closet. A small child crouched at the foot of my bed, staring at me with eyes that were just dark hollows. They weren't in the room. They were in the reflection. I slowly turned my head. The room was empty. I looked back at the window. The woman was now right behind the reflection of my shoulder, her mouth moving in sync with a new, clear whisper that filled the actual physical air of the room. "We've been waiting for you." The child in the reflection reached out a hand towards the glass. And on this side, in the real world, I felt an icy, small finger trace a line down my arm. I ran. I didn't grab a thing. I just ran out of the cabin, down the dark driveway, and didn't stop until I found a spot with a bar of cell service to call a taxi. I sold the cabin for a pittance to a property developer. Last I heard, they bulldozed it to build vacation homes. I sometimes get emails from the New Residents Association newsletter. The last one had a community notice. It asked politely if anyone knew why all the new houses built on that plot had their master bedroom mirrors mysteriously cracked, or why children reported seeing the old-time family in their windows at night. I deleted it, but I still see my own reflection pause sometimes when I'm tired and its mouth moves a second after mine. Thank you for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, you know this is the place for more. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a tale that lingers. Tell me in the comments, would you have opened the door? Story 2. The night we inherited a different family. The house didn't want us, but it decided to keep us anyway. My name is Marcus, and until 3 months ago, the word inheritance conjured images of dusty china and maybe a decent watch. Not the keys to Willowwood, my great-aunt Alara's sprawling, secluded estate. The lawyer's letter called it a character property, which is realtor speak for money pit with secrets. My girlfriend, Lee, saw it differently. She's a photographer, always chasing the perfect, moody shot. Think of the light, Marcus. Shed said, her eyes alight with a vision I couldn't share. We can fix it up, sell it, and finally put a down payment on a place in the city. So we packed for a weekend of assessment, our car loaded with cleaning supplies, takeout, and a naive sense of possibility. The first unsettling detail was the silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was a thick, woolen quiet that swallowed the sound of our car engine the moment we turned onto the gravel drive. The second was the smell, not damp or decay, but a cloying, sweet scent of dried roses and old paper, as if the air itself had been preserved. The third was the state of the garden. While the house was shrouded in ivy and neglect, the rose bushes flanking the heavy oak front door were meticulously pruned, their crimson blooms obscenely vibrant against the gray stone. Lee saw it as charmingly gothic. I just felt watched. The interior was a time capsule. Heavy velvet drapes, furniture shrouded in white sheets, and portraits of severe-looking ancestors lining the grand staircase. In the main parlor, we found a large, ornate journal on a pedestal desk. Its cover was tooled leather, embossed with a symbol that looked like a twisted tree inside a circle. Lee flipped it open. "It's a ledger," she said, her finger tracing down a column of dates and names, all in the same spidery ink. "Listen to this. September 12, 1898. Received, Thomas Alistair. Quality, strong, purpose, guardian of the Eastern Wall, weird, right? Must be some kind of family business record." She took a photo of the page with her phone, the flash too bright in the dim room. I felt a sudden, irrational urge to snap the book shut. That first night, the sounds began. Not the groans of an old house, but distinct, purposeful noises. The soft, shuffling tread of footsteps in the hallway outside our bedroom, pausing right at the door. The faint, melodic humming of a tune I almost recognized, coming from the sealed-off servants' quarters. Lee slept through it, exhausted from the drive. I lay rigid, listening, telling myself it was the wind in the chimneys. But there was no wind. Okay, let me pause here for a second, because I have to ask you, watching this, what's the one sound that absolutely chills you to the bone? For me, it used to be a sudden bang. Now it's that slow, deliberate shuffle when you know you're supposed to be alone. Let me know in the comments. The next day, in the cold light of a gray afternoon, my fear felt silly. We decided to explore the grounds. At the far edge of the overgrown garden, half swallowed by thorny brambles, stood a small stone structure-ria mausoleum. The family name, Willowwood, was carved above the door, but the iron gate was secured with a heavy, modern padlock. As I peered through the rusted bars, I saw not stone coffins, but shelves. And on those shelves were rows of small ceramic jars, each labeled with a tarnished brass plate. I couldn't read the names, but the air that seeped out was icy and carried that same sweet-rotten rose smell. Lee, of course, wanted to get a shot of it. As she raised her camera, her phone, which Shed balanced on a nearby stump for light, buzzed violently and died. My own phone in my pocket went from 70 to a dead black screen in the same instant. We retreated to the house, our false confidence shattered. That evening, the false safety arrived. Wed decided to leave first thing in the morning, the for sale sign be damned. We barricaded ourselves in the small, modernized kitchen, the only room that felt somewhat separate from the house's oppressive history. We laughed a little too loud, made plans for a cheap motel, and ordered a pizza on my now functioning phone. For 2 hours, the house was silent. Just an old, empty building. Lee dozed on my shoulder. I started to believe Wed spooked ourselves with shadows and stories. The inheritance was a mistake, but it was over. The climax began with a whisper. It was inside my head, a voice like crumbling parchment. "The ledger is unbalanced." I jerked awake. Lee was still asleep. The kitchen was dark, save for the moonlight through the window. Then the door to the main hall of one wed locked and wedged a chair under slowly swung inward, not with a bang but with a silent, impossible grace. The hallway beyond was pitch black, but standing at the threshold were two figures. They were silhouettes of absolute darkness, featureless but for their height and the suggestion of old-fashioned clothing. They didn't move, they just waited. My blood turned to ice. I shook Lee, my throat too tight to speak. Her eyes fluttered open and she saw them. A small whimper escaped her lips. One of the figures raised an arm, a long, indistinct finger pointing not at us but past us toward the parlor. The message was clear. Trembling, holding on to each other, we shuffled past them. The air around them was freezing. We entered the parlor. The ledger was open on the desk and a fresh line of ink, wet and glistening in the moonlight, glowed on the page. It read October 27th, present day. Received Lee Marie Carter. Quality, luminous, purpose, portrait for the West Gallery. Lee screamed. I grabbed the book and hurled it into the cold fireplace. No, I roared at the empty room. You don't get to put her in your book. A sound like a sigh moved through the house, a rustling from every corner. The portraits on the stairs, their eyes were no longer painted. They were dark, hollow pits, and all of them were turned, tracking our movement as we backed toward the front door. We ran. We didn't pack. We fled into the night, the gravel cutting our feet, and didn't stop until we were 10 miles down the main road. We reported it to the police, of course. They found nothing. No figures, no wet ink. The ledger was back on its desk, its last entry still from 1921. They suggested stress carbon monoxide. We almost believed them. We never went back. We signed the papers to let the state take the property. Last week, a package arrived at our new apartment. No return address. Inside was a framed photograph. It's a perfect, hauntingly beautiful black and white portrait of Lee, asleep on that first night in Willowwood, moonlight on her face. It's the most stunning work of photography I've ever seen. We never developed film there. Lee's camera was digital. The style is daguerreotype from the 1800s. And tucked into the back of the frame was a small slip of parchment with a single line in that familiar spidery hand. The ledger always balances. I burned the photo, but some things I am starting to understand you can't destroy by fire. Because last night I heard it against that soft, shuffling tread, pausing outside our apartment door. And this morning Lee mentioned a new, beautiful scent in the air like dried roses. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you're not alone. Please give this video a like if you want more tales of inherited nightmares, and subscribe for new horrors every week. Let me know in the comments what you think was in those jars, or what you would have done differently. And remember, sometimes an inheritance isn't a gift, it's a transaction. Story 3. The night I shouldn't have checked my security cameras. I have to tell you about the worst mistake of my life, and it started with a simple notification on my phone. My name is Ava, and I was house-sitting for my aunt in her remote, minimalist airbnb nestled deep in the redwood forests of Northern California. It was supposed to be a peaceful retreat, a chance to finish my novel away from the city's noise. The place was all glass and sleek wood, a modern cube perched on the edge of a silent, ancient forest. It felt safe, luxurious even. But from the first night, 3 things felt off. The Wi-Fi would cut out at exactly 3:17 a.m. every night. The motion sensor lights on the deck would sometimes flicker on for no reason, pointing towards the tree line, and I could never shake the feeling that the tall, dark windows were less for me to look out of, and more for something else to look in. The first few nights were just about the silence. It was a heavy, woolen kind of quiet that seemed to swallow sound. I'd hear the creak of the house settling and tell myself it was just the wood contracting in the cold. I'd see a shadow shift in the corner of my eye and blame it on the play of moonlight through the towering trees. I was jumpy, but that was normal, right? Anyone would be, alone in such an isolated place. I relied heavily on the security system, a network of 4 cameras covering the front door, the deck, the driveway, and the back woods. Checking the live feed on my tablet became a nervous habit, a digital pacifier. Seeing the empty, static views of pine needles and wooden decking was my proof that the unease was just in my head. The real trouble began on the 4th night. The Wi-Fi dropped at its usual time, 3:17 a.m. I sighed, rolling over in the vast, too-quiet bed. But my tablet, which I'd left charging on the nightstand, pinged. A motion alert from the security system. That was impossible without Wi-Fi. A cold trickle of confusion cut through my sleepiness. I picked it up. The alert was for the woods-facing camera. The feed was frozen on a single, grainy frame. It showed the tree line pitch black, but in the center, just at the edge of the infrared's range, was a tall, thin shape. It wasn't a tree. The proportions were wrong, too straight, too still. It looked like a person, but elongated, with limbs that seemed just a fraction too long. I stared until my eyes burned. The Wi-Fi came back. The feed refreshed, showing nothing but empty forest. I told myself it was a glitch, a trick of the night vision on a weirdly shaped stump. I almost believed it. Hey, before I go on, let me ask you something, because I think about this a lot now. What's your personal ritual when you're at home alone and you hear a strange noise? Do you freeze and listen, grab something for defense, or do you immediately go to check it out? Let me know in the comments. For me, I used to be a checker. I needed to see there was nothing there to calm my nerves. That changed after this. The next day, the glitches became more persistent. The camera feeds would sometimes stutter, the images fragmenting into digital blocks for a second before resolving. I started seeing the shape in the still frames of the motion alerts. Never in the live feed, only in the frozen captures. It was always in the woods camera, and it was always closer. One frame showed it by the large, lightning-scarred pine tree, 30 yards away. The next night, it was at the edge of the deck, 20 yards out. Its form was becoming clearer, though no more logical. It was a man, I thought, but he wore no clothes, and his skin was a mottled, grainy gray in the infrared. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and his eyewear there should have been the flat black discs of no reflection seemed to be solid, dark pits. I called the security company. They ran diagnostics and said the system was fine, but suggested local wildlife. Perhaps a bear standing on its hind legs might be triggering the motion sensor. It was a logical explanation. I clung to it. That night, I decided to prove it to myself. I waited until 3 a.m., armed with a flashlight and my phone, and I stood at the glass door leading to the deck. I would watch the woods camera live on my tablet and compare it to the real view. At 3:16, the Wi-Fi symbol on my tablet dropped, right on schedule. My heart thudded against my ribs, the live feed froze, and then a new motion alert popped up. Not from the woods camera, from the indoor living room camera. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I slowly turned my head, looking from the tablet in my hands to the open-plan living room behind me. The alert. Story 4. The shadows in my grandmother's house. I wasn't afraid of the dark until I learned it could stare back. My name is Lee, and for most of my life, my grandmother's house was a sanctuary of lemon polish, cinnamon buns, and worn floral armchairs. When she passed, leaving the sprawling, creaky Victorian to me, her only grandchild, it felt like a final, loving hug. Moving in was a bittersweet project, a way to feel close to her while I figured out my own messy life. The first few nights were peaceful, filled with the comforting groans of old pipes and the sigh of ancient floorboards settling. But then I started noticing the oddest things I'd brushed off as a kid. The way the grandfather clock in the hall would sometimes chime 13 times at midnight, a low, shuddering series of notes. The persistent smell of damp soil and ozone in the second-floor hallway, no matter how many windows I opened or air fresheners I plugged in. And the shadows. The house was full of them, long and deep in the corners, but they seemed denser here, more substantial. Like if you looked at them from the corner of your eye, they didn't quite match the shape of the furniture casting them. I tried to rationalize it. Grief does strange things. An old house is just an old house. But the rationalizations crumbled one Tuesday evening. I was reading in the parlor, the single lamp casting a warm pool of light, when I felt a chill, sharp and localized, like someone had opened a freezer door directly behind me. The hair on my arm stood up. And then from the dark dining room across the hall, I heard it. A soft, wet, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the Persian rug. My blood turned to ice. I sat frozen, book forgotten in my lap, straining to listen. The sound stopped. Silence, thick and expectant, pressed in. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling, and flicked on the dining room light. Nothing. The rug was smooth, undisturbed. But the smell of wet earth was overpowering. Have any of you ever felt that? Not just a creepy feeling, but a certainty in your gut, deep in your animal brain, that something is watching you from a place you can't see. That the rules of your safe, normal world have quietly been suspended. It's a lonely terror, because how do you even begin to explain it? The incidents escalated, but always just on the edge of perception. I'd wake up to find my bedroom door, which I always shut tight, standing ajar. The darkness in the hallway feeling like a solid, breathing thing. Pictures on the walls would be ever so slightly crooked in the morning. One night, a crash from the kitchen sent me running downstairs, only to find every single cupboard door wide open, pots and pans scattered on the floor, as if a furious, invisible wind had torn through. I called a friend the next day, laughing it off as probably a poltergeist, but the laugh was brittle and tasted like fear. Then came the night of the storm. The power died, plunging the house into a blackness so complete it felt suffocating. I fumbled for candles, the flickering light making the familiar room alien, full of leaping shapes. That's when I saw it. My shadow, cast against the floral wallpaper by the candle in my hand, except it was wrong. My shadow was standing still, but the silhouette on the wall was moving. It tilted its head slowly as if studying me. I dropped the candle. It sputtered out on the hardwood, and in the instant of final, plunging darkness, I heard a whisper right by my ear. It wasn't a word, just a sound of dry, rustling exhalation, like leaves skittering over stone. I spent the rest of the night huddled on the sofa in the living room, a baseball bat in my lap, surrounded by every battery-powered light I could find, praying for dawn. The next morning, in the harsh, sane light of day, I decided enough was enough. It was grief, it was stress, it was an overactive imagination fueled by an old, noisy house. I was being ridiculous. I called a handyman to fix a sticking window in the attic, a place I'd avoided since moving in. While he worked, I forced myself to go up and finally sort through the last of Grandma's trunks. The air was hot and still, dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. It felt normal, safe. I opened a small, lacquered chest I'd never seen before. Underneath a stack of old letters tied with ribbon, I found it. A large, leather-bound book, its cover worn smooth. It wasn't a photo album or a diary. It was a ledger of sorts, but the entries weren't financial. They were names, dates, and... Story 5. Why I never sleep with the windows open. I need to tell you about the worst mistake of my life. And it started with a simple, stupid decision to save a few bucks on an air bill. My name is Annika, and I am a freelance graphic designer, which is a fancy way of saying I work odd hours and am always looking for a quiet place to concentrate. I found the listing for the Hemlock Retreat deep in the pine forests of the Pacific Northwest. The photos were stunning, a modern, angular cabin, all glass and dark wood, perched on the edge of a ravine with a view that went on forever. The price was suspiciously low for such a place. The reviews were sparse but glowing, all mentioning the profound silence and total disconnection. I booked it for a month, thinking it was the perfect place to finish a big project and finally get my portfolio in order. The drive up was beautiful, then monotonous, then vaguely unnerving. The paved road turned to gravel, the gravel to a packed dirt track barely wide enough for my car. The GPS gave up 10 miles out, but the host's instructions were precise, almost eerily so. Turn left at the three-trunk cedar. Follow the deer trail, not the logging road. The keypad code is the last 4 digits of the confirmation number. I finally pulled up to the cabin as the last of the sunset was bleeding out behind the mountains. It looked exactly like the pictures, but the air was colder, sharper, and the silence wasn't peaceful. It was a dense, absorbing quiet, like the forest was holding its breath. I noticed the first unsettling detail right away. All the windows' huge floor-to-ceiling panels of glass were spotlessly clean, but the screens were missing. Every single one. I shrugged it off. Maybe they were being repaired. The second detail was the smell inside. Not musty, as you'd expect in the woods, but a clinical, clean scent like ozone and rubbing alcohol, barely masking something earthy and damp beneath. The third thing was the guest book. It was open on the coffee table, but every entry was the same, written in different handwriting. The view is worth it. I settled in. The first couple of nights were fine. I worked, I made coffee, I enjoyed the staggering view of the stars unpolluted by city lights. The silence, though, began to get under my skin. No insects, no owls, not even the rustle of leafless trees were preternaturally still. I started hearing my own heartbeat in my ears. Then on the third night the sounds began. Not from outside, but from inside the walls. A soft, rhythmic scratching, like something gently dragging a single claw along the interior of the timber beams. It would start around 2 a.m. and stop the moment I sat bolt upright in bed. I told myself it was mice, or better yet, tree branches. But there were no trees close enough to touch the cabin. I want to pause here and ask you guys something because I've thought about it a lot since. What's your breaking point? You know, that one small, weird thing that shifts a situation from a bit spooky to I need to get out. For some people, it's a sound. For others, it's a smell. For me, it was the temperature. The cabin had a state-of-the-art climate control system. Yet every night, the temperature in the bedroom would plummet exactly 10 degrees at 3:07 a.m. I'd wake up shivering, my breath fogging, and the digital thermostat would blink cheerfully, reading a perfect 68 degrees. My skin said it was 40. That was the first time I felt real cold fear, not just unease. The scratching in the walls got louder, more persistent. It developed a pattern, 3 long drags, a pause, then 2 short taps. One sleepless dawn, I pressed my ear against the cool wood paneling. From deep within, I heard it, a wet, shuddering sigh echoing down some hidden hollow space. I stumbled back, my heart hammering. That day, I decided to explore the property, to prove to myself it was just an old, creaky building. Behind the cabin, half hidden by salal bushes, I found a metal hatch set into the hillsidea root cellar, maybe. It was locked with a heavy padlock, but the hasp was new, shiny against the rusted door. Scratched into the paint around the latch were deep, frantic gouges. Not from a tool, from fingers. I called the host. The number went straight to a generic voicemail. I checked the Airbnb app. The listing had vanished. My confirmation email was still there, but the links were dead. A deep, primal panic started to set in. I packed my bags, my hands shaking. I'd leave, drive through the night, bill the company later. But my car, reliable to a fault, wouldn't start. Not a click, not a groan. The electronics were completely dead, as if the battery had been surgically removed. But the interior lights still worked. My phone had no signal, but the Wi-Fi in the cabin, which had been strong, was now gone too. I was cut off. This is where I made my second catastrophic mistake. I decided to wait for daylight to hike out. I reasoned that whatever was happening was tied to the dark. I barricaded the door with a heavy chair, checked every lock on the absurdly large windows, and sat in the middle of the living room with a kitchen knife, a pathetic talisman against the growing dread. The night descended, black and absolute. The false safety of my plan lasted until midnight. The scratching started again, but this time it wasn't in the walls. It was on the glass. Something was outside, dragging a nail slowly, lovingly, across the enormous window facing the ravine. I couldn't see anything in the pitch dark, just my own pale, terrified reflection superimposed over the void. Then a whisper. It didn't come from outside. It seemed to originate inside my own head, a voice that was both dry as fallen leaves and dripping with decay. Open. It was not a request. It was a patient command. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it only grew clearer. The view is worth it. The smell of ozone and damp earth became overpowering. The temperature plummeted. My skin prickled with goosebumps. The scratching on the glass became a furious scraping, like stone on stone. Driven by a terror beyond rational thought, I did something insane. I ran to the bedroom, to the smaller window there, thinking I could maybe break it and climb out. As I passed the thermostat, it flashed, 3:07 a.m. At that exact second, every window in the cabin, huge panoramic ones, the bedroom window, even the tiny bathroom porthole fogged over from the outside, as if a warm, living breath had been exhaled onto them. Through the condensation on the bedroom window, a shape began to press itself against the glass. Not a face, not an animal. It was a humanoid silhouette, but elongated, its limbs bending in too many places. It pressed closer and the fogged glass cleared where it made contact, revealing a patch of mottled, bark-like skin and one deep black eye that held no reflection, only a bottomless hunger. I screamed and scrambled back into the living room. The whispering became a chorus, a susurrus of dead voices filling the air. Let us see. Let us in. We are so cold. The scratching was now a pounding, a violent thudding against the window wall which began to bow inward, the structural groans of the metal framing screaming in protest. The clinical smell was gone, replaced by the stench of wet soil, rotting wood, and something sweetly metallic. In my blind panic, my foot caught on the rug. I fell hard, my head connecting with the leg of the coffee table. Stars exploded in my vision, and the world swam. I came to as the first gray light of dawn was filtering through the windows. The pounding had stopped. The whispering was gone. The cabin was silent and warm. Sunlight, weak but real, streamed in. The windows were clear. My car, when I stumbled outside, started on the first turn of the key. It was as if the entire night had been a fever dream. I drove away from that place like a bat out of hell, never looking back. I didn't stop until I hit a gas station 50 miles down the highway. I called a friend, sobbing incoherently. I never filed a complaint, never spoke of it. I threw out the clothes I was wearing. I tried to forget. But here's the thing. I've moved apartments 3 times since then. I now live in a high-rise in the city on the 15th floor. And last night, as I was falling asleep, I heard it. A faint but unmistakable sound coming from the wall behind my bed. 3 long drags, a pause, then 2 short taps. My phone, charging on the nightstand, lit up with a notification. The screen showed the time, 3:07 a.m., and the air in my sealed, central air-conditioned apartment grew suddenly, piercingly cold. I lay there frozen, staring at the pristine, locked window, because last week I'd noticed something strange and I'd meant to call maintenance about it. All the screens on my windows they're missing. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you're not alone. The unknown is the most terrifying thing of all. If you enjoyed this tale of quiet horror, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps more people find these stories. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the dark. And in the comments below, I'd really like to know, have you ever stayed somewhere that just felt wrong from the moment you arrived? What was the first detail that tipped you off? Stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful views come with the highest price. Story 6. The thing that mimics my family. I need to confess something. The people I am living with are not my family. It started when we moved into my grandmother's old apartment building after the fire. We were lucky, everyone said. A rent-controlled 3-bedroom in a solid, if slightly crumbling, pre-war building. Unit 4B, it was supposed to be a fresh start. My name is Lee, and I am 17. My parents, David and Sarah, and my 8-year-old brother, Sam, were just relieved to have a roof over our heads. The building was mostly empty, our floor especially. The only other tenant on our floor was Mr. Armitage in 4A, a reclusive man who smelled of mothballs and muttered to himself in the hall. The first oddity was the smell. Not the mothballs from Mr. Armitage's place, but something else. In the dead of night, a sweet, cloying odor would seep under my bedroom door, like rotting flowers and wet soil. It would be gone by morning, replaced by the normal scent of coffee and dust. The second was the whispering, not from the walls but from the air vents. It was never words, just a soft, rhythmic susurrus, like someone gently shushing a child over and over. I told my mom about it. She smiled that tired, post-fire smile and said, "Old buildings talk, sweetheart. It's just the pipes." The third detail was the most subtle and the most chilling. My family started getting little things wrong. My dad, a lifelong Beatles fan, would hum a tune that was almost yesterday, but the melody was off, just a few notes twisted into something unfamiliar. My mom, who makes the world's best grilled cheese with exactly 3 slices of American, started using cheddar. And Sam, my chatterbox brother, would sometimes sit in silence for an hour, staring at the wall where the old water stain vaguely resembled a face. Hey, while I am setting the scene for you, let me ask you something. What's the one habit or detail about someone you love that you'd instantly know was wrong if it changed? Something small, something only you would notice. Leave it in the comments, it's weirdly relevant. The escalation was slow, a drip feed of wrongness. The whispering in the vents grew louder, more distinct. One night lying awake, I swear I heard my own name woven into the static hiss. Lee, sleep, Lee, I shot up, my heart hammering. I pressed my ear to the cold metal vent. The whispering stopped. Then from the other side came 3 slow, deliberate taps. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't sleep that night. The smells got stronger, more localized. The rotting flower scent began emanating from the hallway closet, the one that was always locked. My dad said he didn't have the key, that it must have been sealed by the landlord. But one afternoon, I saw the doorknob slowly turn, all on its own, before clicking back into place. I started having dreams. Vivid, suffocating dreams of being buried in the building's foundation, of roots growing through my ribs, of a presence that wasn't malicious but hungry. Hungry for the warmth of a family, for the patterns of our lives. Then the mimicry began. It'd be in the kitchen, and from the living room, it'd hear my mom call, Lee, can you come here? But when it'd go in, she'd be asleep on the couch. It'd hear Sam's giggle from his empty bedroom. The worst was my dad. I came home from school to find him sitting at the dining table, perfectly still, staring at the wall. Dad, he didn't blink. Then, without moving his head, his lips curved into a smile that was too wide, showing too many teeth. Hello, Lee, he said, but his voice was wrong, layered with that same vent whisper. I backed away and he blinked, the smile vanishing. Hey, kiddo, tough day, he asked, his voice normal. I told myself it was stress, my imagination, trauma from the fire. The false safety came on a Sunday. The sun was shining. We had a normal breakfast. No weird smells, no whispers. My mom made pancakes. Sam talked nonstop about a video game. My dad read the paper and cracked his usual bad jokes. I felt a wave of profound relief. It had been in my head. The building was just old. We were all adjusting. I volunteered to take the trash down to the dumpster in the alley just to get some air. The normalcy felt like a balm. When I came back up, the atmosphere had shifted. The apartment was silent, not peaceful silent, absorbent silent, the kind of silence that swallows sound. The sweet, rotten smell was back, so thick I could taste it at the back of my throat. Mom, Dad, my voice was small, eaten by the hallway. I walked into the living room. They were all there. Mom, Dad, and Sam standing in a semicircle facing the locked closet. Their postures were identical, stiff and unnaturally straight. Guys, I whispered. They turned in unison. Their faces were slack, expressionless, but their eyes were dark, too dark, like pools of spilled ink. Sam spoke first, but the voice that came out was a chorus of whispers, the same whisper from the vents. We've been waiting for you, Lee. We've learned all your patterns. My dad's head tilted, a mechanical bird-like motion. The man in 4A taught us so much, the whisper voice said through his lips, but his patterns were old, stale. Yours are so much warmer. My mom took a step forward, her movement fluid yet wrong, like a puppet learning to walk. We can be your family now, a better family. One that never leaves, never changes. Well live in the walls, well breathe in the vents. We are the building, and the building is hungry for life. I stumbled back, terror freezing my blood. This was the climax. The thing that had been nibbling at the edges of our reality was now standing in front of me, wearing the faces of everyone I loved. It wasn't a ghost. It was something older, something that fed on the psychic imprint of families, a parasitic memory that grew in the dark places of forgotten homes. It had consumed Mr. Armitage, and now it was trying to consume us. You're not them, I choked out. Sam's small body smiled that terrible, wide smile. We can be. Let us in, Lee, just let us in. It doesn't hurt, we just copy. Then the originals can go into the dark, into the foundation. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. Not out the front door, it was too far, past them but into the kitchen. I grabbed the heaviest pan I could find and sprinted to the locked closet. With a scream that tore from my lungs, I swung it at the doorknob. Once, twice. The old wood splintered. The door flew open. Inside wasn't a closet. It was a hollow space, a vertical shaft dropping into darkness. The sweet, putrid smell billowed out like a breath. And lining the walls of the shaft, packed in like wasp larvae, were pale, fibrous shapes. Shapes that vaguely resembled human forms, fused with the brick and plaster. One of them had Mr. Armitage's tweed jacket, and at the very edge of the light I could see three fresh, pulsing nodes beginning to form, their outlines hauntingly familiar. A cold, dry hand closed around my wrist, my mother's hand but cold as stone. The whisper was all around me now inside my head. Too late. The pattern is already set. I wrenched myself free with a sob and ran. I don't remember getting down the stairs or bursting out into the alley. I just ran and didn't stop until I found a police car. They didn't believe me, of course. They found my family in the apartment. They were confused, they said, disoriented. My parents claimed Id had a psychotic episode, broken the closet door in a fit. They seemed fine. A little quiet, but fine. The police chalked it up to trauma. Children's services got involved. I'm staying with my aunt now across town. I tried to tell her everything. She thinks I need therapy. Maybe I do. But last night, as I was trying to sleep in her quiet, modern house, I heard it. Faint but unmistakable from the air conditioning vent. A soft, rhythmic shushing. And this morning, my aunt made me eggs. She's always made them scrambled. Today, they were sunny side up. She smiled at my surprise. Thought I'd try something new, she said. Her smile was just a little too wide.